Get out of my way right now!
It's all right, son. We're here to help. Nobody is gonna hurt you. Listen to me. Everything is gonna be all right, okay? Just stay calm. It's okay, honey. Come on out.
We just want to help you.
You're safe now.
The plates rattled on the counter like a warning. The cook's hands were steady, but her eyes tracked the movement of the man's boots across the worn kitchen floor. His voice pressed close, too close. I told you, there's nobody else here. Right? The question hung heavy, sharp, like the edge of a knife. She didn't answer. She dropped to her knees, not in fear, but to see. To see what wasn't supposed to be there. Under the table, a small body curled tight, eyes wide, frozen. The child was barely breathing, silent, trembling. What are you doing down there? The man demanded, leaning over the edge of the table. Silence. Nothing but the scrape of his boot against the floor. The cook leaned her body forward, shielding the child from his view, her arms pressing down lightly, an unspoken promise to protect. Hey! I'm not gonna grab you, she whispered. The child didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't even breathe differently. A pause. A shift of weight. The man muttered, "You said there wasn't anyone else here." "I didn't say that," she replied, her voice steady, careful. The words were a shield. The child's small fingers gripped her wrist, seeking contact, searching for assurance. She let them hold on. She kept her eyes on the man, watching for any sign he'd reach under, but he froze, his hand hovering midair as if the table itself warned him. Outside the kitchen, a door creaked. A faint flash of metal caught her eye. The sheriff, or someone close enough to carry authority, appeared in the doorway. The badge glinted, harsh and real. The man who had cornered her froze, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Sheriff," the word came out almost as a warning, almost as a plea. The cook didn't flinch. She stayed low, hands still over the child, who seemed to shrink even smaller beneath the table. "Whose kid is that?" The sheriff asked softly, carefully, a weight in his voice that made the air feel thick. Without thinking, without hesitation, she said, "Mine." The words hung in the air. She didn't know if she was lying or telling the truth yet, but the child's fingers relaxed against her wrist, a tentative trust forming in the smallest gesture. The man stepped back, muttering under his breath, his eyes darting between the cook and the sheriff. This isn't yours," he said finally, trying to assert control. "I said it is," she shot back, firm, eyes never leaving his. The child made a small, almost imperceptible sound, a soft hiccup of relief. She didn't move, didn't speak, but the air shifted. The sheriff's eyes narrowed, assessing, calculating, but he said nothing, letting her words carry their own weight. "Get back," she told the man, her voice low, dangerous. "Or I swear you won't like what comes next." The man hesitated, swallowed hard, and finally retreated toward the kitchen door. The cook let her hands slide slightly, reassuring the child, letting them know she was there, steady, unflinching. The kitchen felt impossibly small, every shadow elongated, every scrape of a boot sounding like a threat. "It's okay," she murmured, almost to herself, almost to the child, trying to calm the tremor in the air. The child's eyes flicked to hers, finally, a silent acknowledgement that someone was on their side. The sheriff stepped fully into the room, eyes scanning, taking in the tense triangle, the unspoken threat hanging in the kitchen air. His gaze softened slightly on the child. "You'll be safe here." For now, he said. The cook nodded, still crouched, still shielding, still waiting for the next move. The man who had confronted them lingered in the doorway, hands clenched, voice low. You can't just take someone else's kid and call it yours. I just did, she replied. The word fell heavy, resolute. The child shifted slightly, pressing closer, seeking the warmth and certainty only the cook could give. Outside the room, a faint sound of a horse stirred in the barnyard, a reminder that the world outside the kitchen could be as dangerous as the one under the table. The sheriff looked at her, waiting, assessing, knowing she would hold the line until it was no longer safe to do so. I'll stay, she said, voice firm. I'm not leaving until they're out. He nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement of her choice, of the unspoken agreement that the child's safety came first. The cook took a slow breath, keeping her body low, keeping her hands over the child, letting them know, wordlessly, that they were not alone, that someone would stand between them and the violence that had forced them into hiding. The kitchen was quiet now, the tension simmering, every shadow waiting to see who would move first. The sheriff's eyes softened again on the child. You're going to be all right, he said, not as an order, but as a promise. The cook's fingers pressed lightly to the child's wrist, a small gesture, solid and unwavering. The child let out a tiny breath, almost a sigh, almost relief, as if the promise itself was enough to hold on to. The man in the doorway finally left, the kitchen returning to a tense silence, broken only by the quiet, steady presence of those who would protect what needed protection. In that moment, beneath the heavy kitchen table, fear met something else, something steady, something determined, and it held, fragile but real, until the world outside decided to wait. The kitchen was quiet now, but the tension didn't lift. The sheriff stayed near the doorway, his hand resting lightly on the badge at his belt, watching the cook and the child under the table. The man who had confronted them was gone, but his presence lingered like smoke. The cook stayed low, one hand shielding the child, the other resting lightly on the floor. The child's small fingers clutched her ankle, a silent plea for protection. The sheriff knelt slowly, trying to meet the child's eyes without seeming threatening. You got papers? He asked, careful, almost gentle. The cook didn't flinch. You need them, she shot back, voice steady. I need the truth, he said. Then stop asking questions you don't want answered, she replied, her tone even, but carrying a warning. The child's fingers tightened around her wrist, eyes flicking nervously toward the sheriff. She kept her own gaze locked on the man, reading every shift of weight, every twitch of his hand. The kitchen felt smaller now, walls closing in with the weight of unspoken danger. A deputy appeared at the doorway, leaning close to whisper something the sheriff couldn't hear. Missing, he muttered, the word incomplete, unfinished, like it was too heavy to say out loud. The sheriff's gaze flicked to him, a silent question, but the deputy just shrugged. The cook felt the child shiver and pressed her hand lightly to their small shoulder. It's okay, she whispered. The child didn't speak, didn't even nod. Their eyes remained wide, alert, afraid. The sheriff shifted, trying a softer approach. You're safe here, he said, low. Nobody's going to hurt you. The child's gaze flicked to him for a moment, then back down. Silence hung thick. The cook let out a slow breath. She could feel the bruises on the child's wrist, careful, measured, old. Someone had trained this fear. The memory hit her chest like a hammer, but she pushed it down. Right now, the child mattered. The sheriff leaned closer, voice softer, almost coaxing. You can come out. Nobody's going to take you away. The child flinched, pressed closer into her shadow, a tiny figure trembling beneath the table. The cook whispered quickly, firmly, you don't have to say anything. Just stay still. Let them see you're here. That's enough. The sheriff nodded, reading her body language, but he stayed alert. The tension was thick, a living thing in the air. The cook caught movement out of the corner of her eye. The deputy was shifting again, glancing toward the hallway. Something's not right, she murmured. The sheriff glanced at her, sharp now. What do you mean? That deputy, she said, keeping her voice low. He knows more than he lets on. Watch him. The sheriff's eyes followed. The deputy's hand moved toward his pocket, almost too quick, almost too careful. The cook pressed her hand to the child again, letting them know they weren't alone. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm right here. Nobody's taking you today." The child made a soft sound, almost a whimper, but didn't move. The sheriff's voice softened further. "I can stay with you. Just tell me if you're hurt. Any marks, anything they left behind." The child's small fingers traced lightly over the bruised wrist. The cook's throat tightened, remembering her own history of silence and hidden pain. She pressed her hand lightly over theirs, a silent promise that they would get through this. Outside the kitchen, a door creaked. The sound was faint but sharp in the stillness. The sheriff's eyes flicked toward it, alert. The cook didn't move, didn't look, kept her body over the child. "We'll come back," he said finally, standing, voice heavy with promise and uncertainty. The cook's head lifted slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. "No one's safe until that's true," she said, low, firm. The child flinched at the words, hiding closer, seeking the weight and certainty of her presence. The sheriff paused, reading the unspoken message, then nodded. He stepped back toward the doorway. The cook kept her hands over the child, eyes following him until he left. Silence filled the kitchen again, but it was a tense, watchful silence, not relief. The child's fingers loosened slightly, still clinging, still cautious. The cook pressed a gentle kiss to the crown of their head, whispering softly, "You're okay. You're okay with me." The child exhaled slowly, a tiny breath that felt like permission to exist in the space, but still they did not speak. Outside, the faint creak of the floorboards echoed, the house itself holding its breath. The cook stayed low, steady, silent, a wall between the child and the weight of what had already happened. The deputy's presence lingered in the hall, unseen, unheard. The cook felt eyes on them, but didn't look up. She let the child press closer, let them feel the solidity of her body, the certainty that no one would take them now. The shadows in the kitchen shifted as the morning light came through the windows. Plates still rattled occasionally with the movement of the old house. The sheriff's departure left a quiet authority behind, a promise that some law, some justice, existed, even if fragile. The cook whispered again, low, unwavering, "It's just us here. Nobody can touch you." The child's eyes met hers for the first time fully, a flicker of trust, tiny and hesitant, but real. Outside, the world carried on with its threats and its secrets. Inside, beneath the heavy kitchen table, fear met steady determination. And for the first time that morning, the child felt the faintest pull toward safety, guided by the only person who had stood in the space between them and the violence they had been hiding from. The kitchen stayed silent after the sheriff left. Plates cooled on the counter, untouched, the clatter of the morning replaced by a quiet that pressed against the walls. The child remained under the table, small and tense, eyes tracing every movement of the cook above them. She crouched low, fingers brushing dust from the floor, not for cleanliness but for control, for grounding. "You hungry?" she asked softly. The child's head tipped slightly, a subtle nod. She reached over, sliding a piece of bread across the floor toward them. The child didn't move immediately, fingers hovering, hesitant. "It's okay. You don't have to say a word. Just eat if you want." The child's fingers touched the bread and pulled it closer, eyes still wide, scanning the room. The cook watched, hands hovering, ready to block any sudden movements. "You hurt?" she asked. Shoulders lifted briefly, a shrug, nothing else. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "You don't gotta tell me anything. You can stay right here if it feels safer." The child's mouth opened slightly, trying to speak, but no sound came. The cook leaned closer, voice gentle. "It's fine. I know you've been told not to speak. I get it." Outside the kitchen, a floorboard creaked. Men passed through the hallway, voices low and hesitant, conversation stopping as they sensed someone under the table. The cook pressed her hand lightly to the child's shoulder, a silent anchor. "They've got rules here," she murmured. "Spoken and unspoken. You can follow your own." The child's fingers traced a line in the dust, hesitant at first, then with more certainty. She slid an old folded letter across the floor, letting it rest near the child. The paper was yellowed, worn, a memory left from her own past, words written long ago to someone she once cared for. The child's finger hovered, then touched the corner, tracing a name. It wasn't theirs. Their gaze flicked to the cook, questioning, seeking explanation. "It's from someone who wanted to protect me," she said softly. "Someone who couldn't anymore. You don't have to understand, just keep it close if it helps." The child drew a shaky line across the floor, connecting the letters, pressing them into the dust. The gesture was small, careful, but it carried meaning. The cook's chest tightened with recognition, a child learning the weight of memory without needing to speak it aloud. Outside, the sounds of the ranch pressed in. Horses shifted in stalls. Boards creaked. Voices murmured. The kitchen felt suspended, a place both safe and charged with tension. The cook maintained her low stance, body shielding, ice tracking the hallway. Another creak. Footsteps approaching. Too many. The child pressed further into her shadow. She whispered, "You don't have to move. You don't have to do anything they want. Just be here." The child's fingers brushed her wrist, seeking reassurance. She let them hold on. A knock came at the door, sharp, impatient. Not polite. The cook's head lifted just enough to see the shadow outside. The child flinched, but didn't move, pressed tight against the floor. "It's all right," she whispered, almost a promise. "I'm not leaving you. Not now, not ever. They'll have to go through me." The knock came again, louder. Voices outside, low and tense. The cook felt the old weight of the ranch pressing down, authority, history, expectation. She glanced down at the child, hands still steady, body protective. "They can knock all they want. We don't have to answer. Not yet." The child's eyes tracked hers, a flicker of understanding passing through fear. Fingers relaxed slightly. A small breath escaped them, slow, almost imperceptible. The cook let it happen, letting the silence stretch, holding the space around them firm and solid. Dust swirled faintly as she moved a little closer, pressing a gentle kiss to the child's head. "We'll wait," she murmured. "They'll come and go. But this spot's ours for now." Outside, the hallway shadows shifted. Men lingered, unsure, waiting for orders, unsure how to force compliance against the quiet resolve in the kitchen. The cook shifted slightly, adjusting her position, hands still over the child, letting them feel the steadfast presence that was keeping the outside world at bay. The letter lay between them, its edges frayed, its words unread but heavy with the weight of protection. The child's fingers brushed it again, tentative, tracing the lines she had drawn in dust. The cook's chest rose and fell slowly. The rules of the ranch, spoken, unspoken, oppressive, controlling, meant nothing here, under this table, in this moment. The child didn't speak, but presence alone spoke volumes. The knock on the door faded, replaced by distant murmurs and the soft sound of movement elsewhere. The cook pressed her cheek gently against the child's hair, whispering, "You can stay here. You can be quiet. And I'll be here, always." The child's hand found hers, small, trembling, but steady enough. Outside, the ranch continued its slow, tense rhythm, but inside, beneath the table, a fragile trust took hold, and for a moment, fear didn't have to be obeyed. The knock on the kitchen door was no longer polite. The cook stayed low, hands steady over the child, body shielding them as the sound repeated, harder this time. She could feel the air shift, the temperature of the room tightening around them. The door creaked open slowly, and a man stepped inside. Not the sheriff. Not anyone expected. He carried the weight of a name the ranch whispered about in hallways and past the fences. Authority that didn't need a badge, just a reputation that made people swallow their words. "That kid doesn't belong to you," he said, voice calm but sharp. The cook didn't flinch. She kept her hand over the child's shoulder, pressing gently. "Neither does this land," she replied evenly, voice steady. "Careful," he warned, eyes narrowing, scanning the room, the table, the shadows beneath it. "I've been careful my whole life," she shot back, voice firmer, the slightest tremor of warning in her tone. The child pressed deeper under the table, small fingers clutching her wrist. The man paused, studied them, then looked past her. "You knew about her," he said finally, voice low. "The woman who worked here before you?" The cook's throat tightened. She swallowed hard. Another woman. Disappeared years ago. She had known her, known the fear she carried home every night. She pressed her lips together. I did, she admitted softly. And it cost her everything. The man's eyes sharpened. Everything? He asked, voice dropping. Yes, she said. She paid the price so someone else might survive. The child flinched at the words, pressed against her leg, silent, tense. The cook reached down, hand brushing the child's head, offering a small anchor. You touch that child, she said, voice low but absolute, I'll burn this place down. There was no laughter. The weight of her words carried the threat fully, unflinching, unshakable. The man's jaw tightened. You think you can make threats here, he said softly. Try me, she replied, eyes steady, body tense but unmoving. The kitchen seemed to shrink. Shadows pressed along the walls. The old furniture groaned in the silence. Outside, the ranch carried on as if nothing had happened, unaware of the small, volatile confrontation inside. She's fragile, he said finally, gesturing toward the child. They all are, she replied. Doesn't make them weak. Another pause. The man exhaled slowly, hands falling to his sides. You knew the rules, he said. Everyone knows the rules here. Why break them for a child who isn't yours? Because she is mine, the cook said, voice firm, unwavering. I didn't ask for her. She didn't ask for me. But I'm the one standing between her and what's left of this place. The child made a small sound, a soft intake of breath, tightening her grip on the cook's wrist. The man's eyes flicked down at the small figure, silent but tense. He moved closer to the table, leaning in slightly. You can't keep her here, he said. People will notice. Families, law, authority, notice all you want, she interrupted, voice sharp. I'll be right here. You won't get her. The man studied her, weighed her words. He took a slow step back, not retreating, just reassessing. You think standing under that table changes anything? He asked. The cook pressed her hand lightly to the child's shoulder. It does. Because right now, she has a choice. And I won't let anyone take that from her. Another silence settled over the room. Outside, the sounds of the ranch continued, horses shifting in stalls, distant footsteps, the low murmur of voices, but inside, the tension hung like a living thing. The man finally straightened fully. Old families don't ask, he said quietly. They take. They decide. And they bury what they don't want seen. The cook's eyes didn't leave his. I see it. I know it. And I won't let it touch her. A faint flicker of respect, or maybe calculation, passed through his gaze. You're bold, he said softly. Bold and reckless. That child isn't yours to protect. I don't care whose it is, she said firmly. I'm protecting her. And if anyone wants to challenge that, they'll have to go through me. The child's fingers loosened, pressing slightly against her hand, seeking warmth and reassurance. She leaned closer, whispering, See? I'm not leaving. I'll stay here. Always. The man shifted again, eyes flicking to the hallway. He had seen enough. I'll leave, for now, he said, voice quiet. But you'll answer for this. The ranch, the rules, everything. The cook didn't move. She pressed a hand lightly against the child's head. We'll see, she whispered. He stepped back toward the doorway, paused, then left, closing the door slowly behind him. Silence returned. The kitchen felt impossibly still. The child remained under the table, trembling, but the cook's steady presence held them in place. Dust shifted faintly on the floor, the letter from earlier still resting near the child. The cook let out a slow breath. You're safe, she said softly, though the word felt fragile, temporary. For now. But I won't leave you alone again. The child pressed a small hand into hers, a flicker of trust passing through fear. Outside, the world carried on with its threats, its secrets, and its rules. Inside, under the heavy kitchen table, the cook's determination created a fragile sanctuary. And for the first time that morning, the child allowed themselves to believe it might hold. The kitchen felt heavier than ever, the air thick with lingering words and threats that hadn't been spoken aloud. The cook stayed low over the child, hand pressing lightly against their shoulder, feeling the tension roll through every tiny movement. Outside, the ranch carried on, horses shifting in stalls, boards creaking under old boots, but inside, the small kitchen was a world suspended. "We should move," she whispered, voice low. The child didn't speak, only nodded slightly, eyes wide, tracing her movements as she guided them slowly toward the back door. Each step was measured, careful, as though the floor itself could give them away. The cook's eyes caught the old well in the yard before she even saw it properly. Its stone edges darkened with age, the wood beam above it worn smooth, as though it had swallowed years of secrets without ever speaking. She paused, hand on the child's shoulder. "That's the well," she murmured. "It knows things. Things you don't have to say aloud to understand." The child's small hand pressed into hers, tight, seeking the certainty she offered. She exhaled, letting the memory surface for just a moment. "I should have said something," she whispered to no one but herself. Silence answered. "I didn't," she added, softer this time. "I stayed quiet. And look where it's brought us." The child's eyes flicked to her, a silent question, searching for meaning. She pressed her hand over theirs, guiding it slowly. "It's not your fault," she said, voice firm but gentle. "Not yet. You just have to be careful. Watch. Listen. Stay hidden if you need to." The child nodded, fingers trembling slightly, brushing against the rough wood of the well's edge. Their eyes followed the darkness within, as if the well could answer the questions they had been too scared to ask. "It sees," she said softly. "It knows fear. It knows people who are gone. It doesn't lie. You don't have to, either." The child pressed closer, small body leaning into hers, absorbing the weight of her presence, letting it replace the absence of safety they had learned to expect. The cook's own memory pressed close, the smell of the well, the cold stone, the quiet of things lost. She swallowed hard, keeping herself steady for the child. "You didn't run from this place," she said, voice low but deliberate. "You hid inside it. You found a corner where no one could see you. That was smart. That was survival." The child didn't answer, only traced a finger along the edge of the well, fingertips brushing the moss and dirt. A tiny shiver ran through them. She leaned closer, whispering, "I won't let them take you. Not from this kitchen, not from this yard, not from anywhere." They stayed there a moment longer, pressed together, letting the quiet hold them. Then footsteps echoed on the porch. Sharp, deliberate. The cook's head snapped up. The sheriff appeared, alone this time, eyes steady, calculating, wary. "You need to tell me what you know," he said, voice calm, but heavy with implication. The cook's gaze flicked to the child, who flinched slightly, eyes wide. She crouched beside them, hand brushing over their head. "We're safe for a moment," she whispered. "Just long enough to speak if we need to. But you don't have to say a word until you're ready." The sheriff took a slow step forward, eyes scanning, careful not to startle the child. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said. "I just need the truth. If you have it, it can help. It can protect you." The child's fingers tightened around hers, hesitant, questioning, weighing the words. She pressed her hand lightly to theirs. "They can hear you, but that's okay," she murmured. "You'll have me here. And you'll have him listening. That's all you need right now." The sheriff's gaze softened slightly, acknowledging the trust being offered in the silence, the fragile connection between cook and child. Outside, the ranch seemed to hold its breath. Horses shifted in their stalls. Boards groaned under the weight of the morning. Shadows stretched long and tense, pressing against the walls and the edges of the yard. She guided the child closer to the well, fingers brushing against the rough stone. "It knows," she repeated softly. "It sees. It keeps the truth if you can't. But right now, it's enough that you're here, that you're alive, that you can choose to speak or stay silent." The child pressed their forehead against her shoulder, trembling, but safe. The cook let the moment last, drawing her own strength from the steadiness of the earth, the weight of the walls, the solid presence of authority at the edge of the yard. "We're not running anymore," she whispered, a promise to herself as much as to the child. "Not from them. Not from the fear. We face it, one step at a time." The sheriff nodded slowly, understanding without words. He stayed near the edge of the yard, eyes on them, a silent guard. The cook let the child take a deep breath, letting it fill the small space around them. "The well remembers," she said softly. "And so do I. But it's not too late. We can still be safe. We can still choose." The child's small hand tightened on hers, a quiet acknowledgement. Together, beneath the shadow of the well, they waited. And for the first time that morning, the cook felt the shift, from fear to decision, from reaction to determination, from hiding to planning the next step. The morning sun fell in long, slow beams across the yard, but inside that moment, beneath the weight of memory and the dark stone, a fragile sense of control began to take hold. The sheriff stayed near the edge of the yard, watching, silent but attentive. The cook crouched with the child, hand resting over their shoulder, pressing lightly to reassure them. The morning air smelled of dust and damp wood, and the shadows of the ranch stretched long across the yard. "Tell him," she whispered, low, almost a command. The child shook their head, small body pressing tighter against her. "I can't," they murmured, voice trembling. "You have to," the cook insisted softly, leaning closer. "If they hear, it's better you speak first than have someone else lie for you." "They'll hear," the child said, voice barely audible. "I know," she whispered. "But we'll manage it. You're not alone." The child's eyes flicked toward the sheriff, wide, uncertain. He crouched slightly, trying to look non-threatening. "I'm here," he said quietly. "I won't make you speak if you're not ready, but anything you tell me will help protect you." The child pressed their small fingers against hers, trembling. They opened their mouth, hesitated, then spoke a broken word. "Mary," they said. The cook's chest tightened. The name carried weight, a shadow from the past, something hidden in the ranch's history. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Mary?" he asked softly, tone careful, listening. The child nodded, small, trembling. She was here." The cook pressed lightly against the child's back. "It's okay. Go slow. One word at a time," she whispered. "I'm right here." The child exhaled slowly, fingers still pressed against hers, and spoke another fragment. "Basement, night," the sheriff's gaze sharpened. Recognition flickered across his face. He pressed a hand lightly to his chest. "I thought that was closed," he murmured. "I thought no one," the cook didn't interrupt. She let the child speak, guiding, steadying, letting the fragments form the shape of a story that had long been buried. "They took her, letters, burned," the child's voice was low, shaky, fragments spilling into the air like pieces of glass. The cook pressed a hand gently against their head. "It's okay. You're safe. You're telling the truth now," she whispered. The sheriff leaned closer, listening, taking in each broken word, connecting them with memory and the weight of the ranch's history. Names, places, dates remained incomplete, but the pattern was clear. The cook felt the child's small body shiver against hers. "They thought silence would protect us," she murmured, mostly to herself. "But truth, even in pieces, will find a way." A badge glinted in the sunlight as the sheriff reached toward the table, setting it down deliberately. Symbolic, quiet, an acknowledgement that some authority was present but constrained, restrained. The child's eyes flicked to it briefly, then back to the cook. She whispered softly, "You're doing fine. Keep going. One piece at a time." The child hesitated, then spoke again, each word a shard of memory. "Basement, letters, water, locked, afraid," the sheriff's jaw tightened. He understood, pieces of a case he had buried years ago resurfacing before him. The cook's hand stayed steady, reassuring, her body a wall between the child and the weight of authority outside. Footsteps echoed faintly from the hall, the ranch's other occupants shifting, sensing movement but unsure of what was happening. The child's voice trembled. They said don't talk." The cook pressed a hand lightly to their wrist. "I know. But it's okay now. You're not alone anymore." Silence followed for a breath, then the child added, almost a whisper, Narration died. The sheriff's eyes darkened. He knew now. Every fragment aligned with what he had hoped was buried, long forgotten. The cook held the child close, whispering reassurance, letting the weight of the words settle into something they could survive together. Another step from the hall. The ranch owner, unseen until now, lingered near the doorway, listening, shadowed, unmoving. The cook noticed him but didn't flinch. It's okay, she whispered. We're telling what needs to be told. Nothing else matters. The child pressed their forehead into her shoulder, trembling. The cook let them, feeling the fragments of fear and memory settle into the space between them, quiet but heavy. That's it, she murmured. One word at a time. You don't have to do more than you can handle. The sheriff straightened slightly, watching, absorbing the truth that had been buried under years of silence. The child's small fingers pressed into hers, a silent bond forming in the fragments of words, trust and fear intertwined. Shadows in the kitchen shifted as the morning light lengthened. The air felt charged, heavy with secrets that had finally surfaced. The cook exhaled slowly, steadying herself. It's done for now, she whispered. You spoke what needed to be said. That's enough. The child nodded slightly, trembling, but holding onto her hand. Outside, the ranch continued its quiet rhythm, oblivious to the weight of confession inside. The cook kept her body close, steadying, letting the child know that even as the truth shaped itself, they were safe. And in that tense, suspended moment, beneath the shadow of authority, beneath the weight of past lies, the shape of the truth began to settle, fragile but undeniable, leaving them poised between fear and something like control. Everything moved too fast. The air shifted in the kitchen like it had a pulse of its own. The child clung to the cook, trembling, eyes wide, scanning shadows. The cook's hands pressed against their shoulders, steadying them, holding them in place. Outside, the ranch felt alive, urgent, tense. Footsteps pounded the floorboards. Voices shouted. The man from before appeared in the doorway again, jaw tight, eyes burning. Don't do this, he barked, but the cook didn't flinch. You already did, she replied, voice low, firm. The child pressed into her, small fingers clutching the folds of her apron. Fire licked the edges of her mind, not literal yet, but the promise of it, the spark of chaos she could unleash if they tried to take the child. Think about the child, the man said, urgency breaking his control. That's why I'm doing it, she said, voice steady, eyes flashing. Sparks of movement ran across the kitchen. Chairs toppled in the commotion. Plates clattered. The child gasped, pressing tighter, but didn't speak. The cook kept herself a wall, blocking, guiding, letting the chaos swirl around them without letting it reach the small body beneath her hands. You can't do this, someone else shouted from the hall, a new voice, shaky but loud. Watch me, she said. Step closer, and you'll see what happens. Outside, the air shifted with the smell of smoke, distant but real, a warning carried on the breeze. The child looked up at her, eyes wide. It's okay, she whispered. I'm right here. You're safe. We'll get through it. The man in the doorway shifted, uncertainty creeping in. Fire, what are you talking about? He demanded. She gestured vaguely toward the old wood stove, toward the coals, toward the history of destruction and threat that had lived in this ranch for generations. Fire is a language, she said softly. It tells you what words cannot. It warns, it protects, it destroys when it must. The child pressed their forehead to her shoulder, trembling, but listening. She let them hold on, small hands gripping her tightly. You see, she whispered. It speaks. And it listens. The man's jaw tightened. You think you can control it? I do, she replied, voice low, unwavering. And right now, it's keeping her safe. Another shout rang out from the hallway. A deputy or worker or someone else, she couldn't see clearly. Step aside. The cook didn't move. Her hands stayed over the child. Her gaze locked on the man. Step aside, she said calmly. I won't let anyone near her. The man hesitated. Tension stretched across the kitchen, thick and sharp. Then the child did something unexpected. They pushed slightly forward, pressing against her, standing on unsteady legs. The cook's hands remained on their shoulders, steadying them. "You're doing it," she whispered. "You're safe. You're standing." The child's eyes were wide, shining with a mixture of fear and defiance. They didn't speak, didn't move further, but the gesture carried a weight no one else could ignore. Outside, the distant wail of sirens began to rise, faint but growing, echoing across the property. The cook held the child's hand tightly, letting them feel the steadiness of her grip. "See? They're coming," she said, voice low. "Not to hurt you. To make sure what's right gets done." The man in the doorway exhaled sharply, stepping back, hands falling to his sides. He studied her for a long moment, then glanced at the approaching lights in the distance. The cook kept her eyes on him, unflinching, letting him feel the certainty she carried. "This is the end of their rules," she whispered. "This is where the old power ends." The child pressed closer, small fingers gripping hers. "I'm here," she said softly. "We're both here. Nothing can take that from us now." The sirens grew louder, closer, and the shadows of authority crept toward the yard, but inside the kitchen, the cook and the child remained a wall of calm in the storm. Fire wasn't just a threat anymore, it was a promise, a language understood between the two of them, a signal that they had taken control of the chaos rather than letting it control them. The child lifted their head slightly, eyes meeting hers, and for the first time, the fear in them shifted, fragile, into something resembling hope. "See," she whispered. "You're safe. You're standing. You're not hiding." The man in the doorway retreated, uncertainty flickering across his face. The lights of the approaching law, sirens, authority, spread across the yard. The cook kept her hand tight on the child's, guiding, steadying, letting the chaos swirl outside without touching the small sanctuary they had created. And for the first time that morning, the child stood fully upright, fully present, holding on to the one person who had never let go. Fire had spoken. The threat had passed. The truth, however fragile, had begun to breathe. Together, in the center of the storm, the cook held the child's hand, letting them feel for the first time that someone would always protect them. Outside, sirens broke the silence. Inside, a fragile, defiant peace took hold, anchored by hands that refused to let go. The kitchen was quiet now. Outside, the sirens had faded, leaving only the distant hum of the ranch settling back into uneasy calm. The child stood in the center of the floor, small hands still gripping the cook's, trembling but steady. The cook pressed a hand to their shoulder, guiding, grounding, letting them feel the weight of her presence. "You're ready," she whispered. "It's time. Say it out loud." The child's eyes flicked to hers, wide, uncertain. "They told me not to talk," they said finally, voice low. "Who?" the cook asked, voice soft but sharp. "Everyone," the child whispered. The cook nodded, pressing a reassuring hand over theirs. "You're here now. Only the truth matters. One word at a time if you need it. Nothing else can touch you." The child exhaled slowly, lifting their chin. "Mary, they locked her in the basement, letters, burned, each fragment fell carefully into the quiet room, small pieces of a larger, hidden story." The sheriff, standing near the doorway, listened silently, absorbing each word, connecting fragments to memories long buried. "Good," the cook said softly. "Keep going. You're doing it. You're telling it your way." The child's eyes darted briefly to the hall, then back, finding courage in her presence. They said, "Don't speak, afraid," but she died. The cook's chest tightened, but she stayed low, steady, hands pressed lightly to the child, letting them feel that they were not alone. The sheriff's jaw tightened, understanding finally what had been hidden, what had been swept aside in silence. The child's words flowed more confidently, still fragmented, but with a rhythm that carried truth. Names fell into place, places, moments, small truths no one had dared speak aloud for years. The cook whispered encouragement, letting them hear each syllable, each piece, as a shield rather than a burden. "You're safe. Keep going. It's okay. I'm right here," she murmured. The child took a small breath, then another, steadying themselves. They wanted no one to know, locked, basement, letters, burned. The cook pressed a hand lightly to their forehead. It's done. You're done. You spoke it. That's enough. The child's lips trembled. But, the cook shook her head softly. Not anymore. You're here. You spoke. That's power. That's protection. The sheriff exhaled slowly, nodding, understanding the fragility of what had just been uncovered. The ranch owner lingered in the hall, silent now, unseen, but aware that the balance had shifted irreversibly. The child's small shoulders sagged, relief mingling with exhaustion, but they didn't run. They didn't hide. They stayed, holding the cook's hand, eyes finally meeting hers with a trust that had been earned through fear and silence. The cook pressed her cheek to the top of their head. You're safe now. You spoke what had to be said. That's enough. I won't let anyone take that from you. Outside, the ranch seemed to hold its breath, the weight of history pressing lightly against the walls. Inside, the kitchen held a fragile peace, built on the courage of one small voice finally speaking, of one steadfast presence refusing to let fear win. The child exhaled slowly, fingers tightening on hers for a brief moment, then relaxing, letting the tension fall away. The cook pulled a chair out slowly, guiding the child to sit at the table for the first time that morning. They obeyed hesitantly at first, then more confidently, settling into a seat, hands folded, presence steady. The cook pressed lightly on theirs. Eat, she whispered. It's your table now. You're part of this. Alive. Seen. Heard. The child nodded, small, fragile, and then took a tentative bite. Words weren't needed. They had spoken enough. The sheriff remained near the doorway, silent, respectful, understanding that his role was to witness, not interfere. The cook leaned back slightly, exhaling. The morning light fell across the table, illuminating the child's small face. For the first time, they looked calm, almost normal, almost whole. The cook pressed a gentle hand against theirs again. I won't let them take you again, she whispered. I promise. You're safe now. And so am I. The child's eyes met hers, small and steady, trust radiating through fear that had once defined them. Outside, the ranch's distant noises continued, indifferent to the transformations inside. Inside, beneath the weight of history, authority, and silence, the cook and the child had created something new, a fragile sanctuary built on courage, truth, and the refusal to let fear dictate the story. And in that quiet moment, between fragments of confession and shards of memory, the world narrowed to the space of two hands holding each other across a table. Life, for the first time that morning, began again. Words had been spoken. Truth had been claimed. Fear had been held at bay. And the cook, steady, unwavering, whispered the final line, not for anyone else, but for themselves and the child beside them, you're safe now. And so am I. The first light of morning crept through the cracked windows of the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of smoke from last night, wood and fear burned away into a quiet calm. The child sat at the table, small hands folded, eyes tracing the faint scratches on the surface, remnants of chaos now muted. The cook moved around the room slowly, gathering dishes, stacking them carefully, but her eyes never left the child. You slept? She asked softly. The child shook their head slightly, hair messy, eyes heavy but alert. Not really, they whispered. She nodded. That's okay. You don't have to. Silence stretched for a moment, comfortable now, not tense. I'm hungry, the child finally said. Good, she replied, sliding a plate of bread and some eggs across the table. Eat. Take your time. They hesitated, fingers hovering, then grabbed a piece, teeth sinking slowly, the act almost sacred in its normalcy. Outside, the ranch began its morning rhythm, boards creaking, a horse calling, distant voices, but inside, a fragile peace held. The cook leaned against the counter, watching, letting the child settle into the space that had been their hiding place and was now a home of sorts. You know, she said softly, voice low, you don't have to hide anymore. Not from me. Not here. The child's eyes met hers, small but searching. But, what if they come back? Their voice trembled, fear lingering like a shadow. She pressed a hand lightly over theirs. Then we'll meet them together. They won't touch you. Not now. Not ever. The child's small fingers pressed against hers, trembling slightly, then held firm. Outside, a horse whinnied, the sound sharp in the morning air. The cook turned toward the doorway, glance brief. I think they'll keep their distance, she said softly. Not everyone dares test someone who isn't afraid to burn what they can't control. The child blinked, absorbing her words, the weight of history and danger still lingering but tempered by this fragile sense of protection. I'm glad you're here, the child said finally, voice small but clear. The cook pressed a hand to their shoulder. Me too, she said simply. Me too. The silence returned, but it was no longer heavy. It carried a rhythm, a heartbeat, a moment of calm after storm. Dust motes drifted in the light, shimmering faintly as if the air itself had been cleansed. I want to help, the child whispered after a pause, eyes down. You already are, she said gently. Being here, being brave, that's help. That's enough. They chewed slowly, carefully, letting the normal act of eating be a small rebellion against fear. She slid another plate across, this one with fresh eggs, as if offering sustenance to body and courage alike. Look, she said, leaning closer, voice soft, you've already done what no one else could. You've told the truth. You've stood. And now, you're here. The child swallowed hard, tiny shoulders lifting slightly, small hands pressing together in quiet triumph. Outside, a board creaked again, someone moving in the hall, but neither flinched. The cook's steady presence was enough. We're not done yet, she whispered. Not with the ranch, not with the truth, but we are done running. That's what matters. For now. The child nodded slowly, taking a bite of bread. A faint smile flickered, hesitant, fragile. For now, they echoed softly. The sheriff appeared at the doorway, watching. He didn't speak, just nodded once, silently acknowledging the bond formed. The courage survived, the fear tempered. The cook's eyes met his briefly, then returned to the child. Morning after, she murmured. We survived it. And we'll survive what comes next. The child traced the lines on the table again, this time gently, with curiosity rather than terror. I think I like it here, they whispered. Me too, she said. You belong here now. And you can speak whenever you want, and I'll listen. Always. Outside, the first sun stretched fully across the yard, warmth breaking through the shadows of the past night. Inside, the kitchen smelled of bread and fire's memory, of safe hands and small victories. The child looked up, tentative, then fully met her gaze. I'm not hiding anymore, they said. She pressed a hand lightly to theirs. Good. Because hiding takes too much. And we've already carried enough of that. They both exhaled, slowly, letting the weight of fear and chaos slip slightly from their shoulders. The world outside still held shadows, but inside, beneath the cracked windows and over the worn floorboards, a new story had begun. Words had been spoken, truth had been claimed, and for the first time, they were not defined by fear. The cook reached across the table, holding the child's small hand. You're safe, she whispered, voice low, absolute. And so am I.